Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Advisory Committee meeting of the 5th of August. We'll start with the agenda. It's the point in front of you. We want to make our council and committee meetings available to as many people as possible, regardless of where they are, virtually and in person. We're still getting used to having meetings with both people in person and those zooming in, so please bear with us if it feels a bit crunchy at times. These hybrid meetings will technically be informal, but because the government has not brought legislation to enable us to continue to operate virtually. But we will run them as if they were formal. They have been advertised, and as you can see, we still have agendas, reports, discussions, and votes. The minutes will also be tabled. Legally, only council present in person will be able to vote, which is a bit exclusive and unsatisfactory. So to ensure all councillors can vote, at the council meeting on the 14th of July, we agreed to delegate to our town clerk, Paul Wing. In this case, it's the business manager and planning manager, Jane Wayne, to carry out informal decisions made by councillors tonight. Otherwise, we'll be running the meeting in the usual way, with everybody chipping in as we go along. Please bear in mind, all our meetings are held as a safe space. Please respect the views, opinions, and comments of others when making comments online on the room. Tonight we have two councillors in the room, Councillor Dorrington and myself, Councillor Steve Tanner. And online we have 4 councillors, Councillor Sheila Gore, Councillor Lizzie Ball, Councillor John Nelson, and Councillor Paul. Moving on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is questions, comments, and information from public and councillors that don't refer to items we'll be discussing tonight. So, questions from the public? No, great. Cool.
To introduce my project Alberta South. Exactly.
Oh yes, we'll be discussing that. I think that's the
third one. Yeah.
We'll be discussing that soon. Yeah. Thank you. Any questions from any councillors? No? Any? Great. Item number 2 on the agenda. Apologies for absence and declaration of any members' interests.
So we've got apologies from Rich Atwood and Maxine Crawley.
Great. And any declaration of interest? No? Great. So on the agenda. To agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of July 2021, which I have and have signed on page. If anyone's got any questions on the minutes? No, if someone could propose those for me then, please. Thank you, Mark. Someone for, thank you, John, and all those in favour.
That's unanimous, yeah. Thank you.
To you, thank you very much. And item number 4 on the agenda, to consider the major clarification to see on Appendix 1. So tonight we'll be starting with item number 644.
644, yes, right. on our list.
So I'll let Jane introduce it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I thought we were expecting the agent to join us either online or in person, but they don't appear to be either. So I'll kick off. So this is land adjacent to White Mill, Marston Lane, Frome, and the application description is outline planning application for 5 self-build dwellings and associated works with details of access and all other matters reserved. So we have actually seen this twice previously as a pre-application, and just to remind councillors that we'd previously questioned the amount of self-build, as it had included an element of market housing in order to bring the self-build forward, and now it's come forward with all 5 being self-build. So the site is outside the town development limits, where normally development wouldn't be allowed. There is policy in the neighbourhood plan which makes reference to self-build being allowed, but there are a set of criteria that go with that, one being that it should either be affordable or part of a trust of people who build the site together, and that doesn't appear to be what's set out in this application. Also in the neighbourhood plan, and there is policy in the local plan which talks about the landscape impact. So in the neighbourhood plan, we have identified the rear of the site, if you like, the views across the town as an important landscape view. And there is an accompanying landscape assessment, but it only shows with an arrow the location or the approximate location of where the houses will be built. And for me, it doesn't give you a clear indication of what that impact will be, although it has been assessed by the people who put it together as, I think I said a medium impact on the landscape assessment. But you know, what does that actually mean? I don't feel that's very clear, although that will be assessed by one of Mendip's consultants when the planning officer looks at it. And again, it doesn't give any real indication of the height of those buildings as part of that landscape assessment. So there is also an objection from the Mendip ward councillor who's concerned about the access. And we have had various representation from neighbours, and I think it's probably as well to hear from those neighbours now before we get into any more detailed discussion. And I believe John would like to speak first. Is the microphone switched on?
First of all, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you've all had my letter of objection, and what I propose to do is to skim through these 7 key areas of objection, one after the other. The first one is a proposal for 5 houses will set a precedent for a further 15 to 25 houses. And the reason I'm saying that is because you can see in the first diagram below that LVA put forward in 2014 a scheme for consultation with Frome Town Council for 24 houses on this site and the field immediately to the north. Then if you turn over, you can see an illustration of that scheme showing the houses. Then in addition to that, if you look at the diagram below, figure 3, you'll see that there's a turning head, which halfway through the scheme, which allows access to the field to the north. On the next page, there's reference here to the pre-application request put in by Pegasus to Mendip District Council, and quotes the council's response in May 2020. And halfway down, you'll see through that response that they're referring to 20 to 30 dwellings on the field as previously proposed through part 2 of the local plan. So it's quite clear, if you take these different pieces of evidence and sew them together, that LVA's objective, if it obtains permission for 5 houses on this site, is to come back for the second application for a further 15 to 25 houses on their field to the north. And this could then result in the next field adjoining Whitewell Lane also coming under pressure for development. I'll move on now to the second reason for objection, that is impact on the landscape and views. The Mendip District Council's carried out a landscape character assessment in 2020. It was actually an updated landscape character assessment, which examined all the different areas around the edges of Frome, looking at and rating them for their quality and character. This side of Frome, the west side of Frome, is the only part of Frome that gets a very high or high rating, whereas the other 6 areas of Frome, around the fringes of Frome, get moderate or low. So a self-build development on this site of 15 to 25 houses will seriously harm this character assessment. Moving on then to the next point, objection. That is, if you take us back to the year 2000, the owners of this site and the fields to the north submitted a proposal to the local planning inquiry to include this land for housing, and a planning inspector made a visit to the site in December 2000. And he said that at that time that there was no need for this site to be allocated for housing. And he mentions, in fact, that it's a somewhat elevated site, fairly visible in distant views from the west. The inspector then goes on to say, it's also questionable whether the new access into the site could be achieved with sufficient visibility splades to permit its safe use, bearing in mind the proximity of the Crystal Road junction. That brings us on then to the next point of objection, which is access and safety. So if we look at the way that the visibility splades were calculated by LVA's transport consultant, they looked at speeds of traffic moving along Marston Lane on which to base their calculation for visibility splades. The speed of traffic was based on an assessment of traffic made 7 to 8 years ago on a weekday morning between 11 and 11:25, 11:05 to 11:25, 20 minutes. And on that basis, in a fairly quiet, non-busy time, they've based their visibility assessments. In my view, this is not a safe method of making that calculation, and therefore it should be put aside. The next reason for objection is the point made by LVA's consultants that there are no self-build housing plots available in Frome. What they don't mention is that they themselves are promoting Selwood Garden community only half a mile away from this site. And in that master plan, they have allocated something in the order of 20 hectares for self-build and innovative development. 20 hectares could produce something in the order of 300 to 400 houses for self-build. So it's somewhat ingenuous to say that there are no sites for self-building when they themselves are putting this forward on the Selwood Garden community, for which a planning application has now been submitted. The next point of objection is incursion into the root protection areas of large trees. You'll see in figure 6, there is a plan showing the root protection areas produced by the arboricultural consultant. And you can see there are incursions into the root protection area of the copper beech tree just off Marston Lane, up the top right-hand, T1 it's called on the plan, and also incursions into the root protection area of T13, the ash tree on the southern boundary. Moving on to the next point of objection is the extensive extent of the area proposed for two-storey development. And that's shown in dark blue on the plan, figure 7. And that dark blue area comes within 2 meters of the northern boundary, and it goes into the root protection areas of the copper beech tree and of the ash tree that I've just mentioned. In addition to that, if you look back at figure 1 on the first page, you'll see that in LVA's scheme put forward in 2014, it refers to, and you see in the yellow area, it says single-storey buildings along the ridge line. And that also repeats to the other houses at the top in the northwest corner of the field. Single-storey buildings on the ridge line. And they say also new planting scheme with hedges and trees to screen and soften the proposal. So if we then go back to the parameter plan, you can see what they're proposing here are 2 stories plus accommodation in the roof, which effectively means 3 stories. And that area of dark blue goes fairly close to the western edge of the site and will be very visible from distant views from the countryside. So that is my final point of objection. And the other points I mentioned after that are things like the it's not in accordance with the local plan, it's outside the settlement limits, and on Frome Town Council's town design statement, it says that development west of Marston Lane would be detrimental to the setting of Frome and its visibility from the surrounding countryside. So I think that takes us through everything. Chairman, if you want to ask any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Councillors. Anyone got any questions for John?
Oh, do you want me to stop sharing?
John
Sorry.
Nelson? Hello, John.
Hi, no, my question is just about this idea of a precedent. If these 5 were permitted, does it naturally open up the door for 20 or 25, or there are other areas along that stretch which also are apparently being discussed around development? Could you, maybe Jane could clarify that?
Sorry, I was being asked 2 questions at the same time.
No, for me, it's just a question of
precedent.
precedent.
Yes, it would set a precedent, but obviously there would still need to be a further application to come in order for that to go ahead. Precedent is a tricky word. Precedent is, you could argue that is set by an appeal inspector when they're giving out their decisions. It would lead the way. Whether or not it would actually get approval for any more is a different question. But actually, at this point in time, we're only really able to consider the application that is in front of us. So it's a kind of yes, maybe answer.
Thanks. Any other questions?
I've got a, oh, if they don't want to ask, okay, I'll learn the class.
Paul.
When that was.
Paul.
It was probably about 2 years ago.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
We've seen it.
There seems to be whispering going on. Who's that?
I didn't want to be clunky.
Yeah, well, firstly, actually, I just wanted to clarify, in terms of further development, that the dwelling that's right adjacent to this application site that's White Mill, is it? And presumably the owner of that, it would have to be on board for any other further development because the access would cross their driveway and completely
I
change
believe the
driveway.
owner is John Beverley.
Okay,
just
I wondered if that might be the case. Okay, so John would have to be up for the further development for it to go ahead, or prepared to take a lot of money, presumably, for them to change his access. Maybe that's just a comment. My other comments, really, I object to this really based on the fact that it doesn't really offer the town anything in particular. It seems to potentially offer the agent and the landowners potentially decent profit, but it doesn't really bring anything to the town. There's no affordable plots
Can I-
proposed or anything. Yeah,
Sorry, can I just interrupt, because I think there's a couple of other residents who want to talk as well.
Sure. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, do that first. Sure,
Question
sorry
up.
to leave, yeah.
Surely if there's any questions specific to what John had just said was what I was asking.
Okay,
but
that's cool.
we can have
Yeah,
that discussion a bit later, if that's okay.
yeah, sure.
Great, thanks. Gentlemen, is there any comments you'd like to?
Yeah, if John would answer the question about access over the drive.
Sorry,
The question of access over the drive, just to say that, because there's an easement, that they would require permission.
yes, Chairman, there is in the agreement when we bought the house back in 1997, we agreed to allow easement over the drive because at that time, Sir Robin Buchanan, who owned the land at that time, was wanting to build a few houses, about half a dozen, I think it was.
Right.
So we are allowing an easement across the drive for that purpose. But since that time, I bought the drive land. There is still the easement on it.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Thanks for that clarification.
All right.
Thank you very much, yeah. Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Ian Lampkin, number 1 Pritchell Road. I've been asked to speak here tonight by a number of residents in Pritchell Road and Marston Lane, some of which are here tonight as well. Firstly, we're a bit disappointed with this application because it's only recently been published and brought to our attention. I actually spoke with Mendit on the 20th of July and was told there had been no application made. We didn't even get letters from Mendip until the 2nd or 3rd of August. And there's no planning sign on the site saying what's been staged for the general public to see when we go past. But as John said before, the land is now owned by LVA and has been subject to several attempts to be developed since 1997. And if both LVA and the previous owners have tried each to put it in the local plan, and each time it's been refused, basically because it's not needed, because there's enough housing planned in the system elsewhere. It's the wrong area. It will set a precedent for future developments, as we just said, and because of the poor access. And as John has said, this application, in our mind, shows a phase 1 of a planned development, and the plan phase 2 would go across the land between White Mill and Critchell Road. The hammerhead and the drainage for the site shows that is a potential that could follow. It's a very pretty application, but I think it does contain a few things that you could say aren't quite 100% true. They say there's been no self-build in Frome, but in actual fact, the 2 houses opposite that site were both self-build, and a number of self-build properties are just finishing in Frome, one in Sturton View and one at the end of White Mill Lane, where it meets Somerset Road. And also on their planning statement, which was submitted by the Pegasus in section 5, they say they try and hold some public consultation. I actually tried to speak to Mr. Tizard of LVA when he was on site, but he just walked past me and ignored me and wouldn't speak. Stephanie Lamb, who's one of his colleagues, when she visited the site and said that she might have time for a chat, she said no, she was too busy and left the site. So they haven't really done the public bit. The other thing on the technical statement by the Trades Design, Transport and Civil Engineering, it contains some nice pictures where there's no traffic, no parked vehicles, and I can assure you there are nearly 99% of the time parked vehicles at the end of Critchell Road in Marston Lane, alongside number 61, 63A of Marston Lane, which does cause a problem with the traffic. Because that is a narrow spot. You can't get 2 vehicles passing there when the buses and lorries go past. Their items of bus services, the details on it aren't correct. They don't even mention all the buses that go past Marston Lane. And they have a point on there, point 214, road safety. It mentions roads that aren't even in Frome, so I don't know how relevant they are. But in the last 6 months, I've actually seen 5 accidents in Marston Lane involving parked cars being hit and cars going into the hedgerow. As John said, that speed survey was carried out 7 years ago for 20 minutes and not even in the relevant peak periods. They also mentioned vehicle trips from the site, and they compare that to one survey in Stoke St Michael. I don't think it's even realistic for 5 houses, let alone if they try for another 20 plus on the rest of the land. LVA, they proudly declare on their website to make more profit turning agricultural land into building land. In our mind, this is agricultural land. Farmer Bob Norris has been rearing cows on there for over 30 years. So I don't see why that should change. So we would urge you not to give this application approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah. Mm.
Okay, so, okay, please do, yeah. Thank you very much.
Can I just,
Sir?
No, John, my father.
Okay. Okay,
He's clearly stated, I think, on the point, I would
great.
stay harder.
Okay, thank you very much. Jane, over to you.
thank you, Steve. Yeah, I just, I've got the policy from the Frome neighbourhood plan in front of me now. So I just thought I would clarify what the criteria for that are. So as you've heard, the site is outside the town development limit. Policy H3 in the neighbourhood plan offers an exception for self-build and community housing. However, there are criteria attached to that, and it's so the first one, in short, is that it provides an appropriate mix of types and sizes reflecting local need. The second one, development will not have a significant adverse impact on the character of the area and local landscape setting. Third one, such proposals should not have an adverse or harmful impact on statutory protected species or habitats. And lastly, the land is held in trust as a community asset in perpetuity. So I think, you know, we've already heard that there are concerns about the impact that it will have on the landscape. And if you saw the civic society comments, they have questioned the impact that it will have on the bats. And as far as I'm aware, there are no proposals to put the land into trust or as a community asset. And just to perhaps reiterate some, so I've had lots of correspondence from various people, and the main issues that have come forward, firstly the traffic. There's an inadequate traffic survey. It was done for a very short duration. It's well out of date, and it wasn't carried out at peak times. And there is some uncertainty about whether the visibility display can actually be achieved. The issues with the route protection plan that we heard from John there, concerns about the landscape assessment, and yeah, as I was just saying, about not meeting the criteria of the neighbourhood plan. So those, to me, are the key issues that we've heard, but obviously for councillors to discuss now.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Thank you. A couple of years ago, this committee, we had a presentation from people who are proposing to develop the self-build places at the front. And I was surprised to see it was LVA, because the only time I heard of them was with regard to Selwood Community Garden Community, which is like a much.
Hold on a minute, Mark, if I could interrupt you.
Sorry, can I sort the microphone up?
Struggling to hear you.
Well, I've broken 3 so
Look, it's got a pile of discarded ones over there.
Try that one.
Anthony in stereo.
Can anybody hear me now?
Take it out and hold it. That's it.
I'm not going to do karaoke. Can you hear me now? Thank you. Right, in case. This meeting, this committee heard a couple of years ago, a presentation from the people who were proposing to develop these very attractive and quite limited self-build units in the field of Marston Lane. And I was surprised to see it was being proposed by LVA, which we've only come into contact through Soul Garden Community, a much bigger development. So I'm now a little bit more concerned that this might be the tip of an iceberg, that there's a bigger field and we could have up to 24, 25 houses in total. So it wasn't as green and fluffy as it might have looked in the first place. They may still be wanting to do this, and we've only got to look at this application. Over the last 18 months or so, I've spent quite a bit of time walking along Marston Lane. I've been helping a friend who had to hide away during the COVID and do shopping and helping out, that sort of stuff. And I've walked along there and driven along there, and the traffic assessment quoted in the application is frankly useless, because it's nothing like what I've experienced there. I see the developers are proposing to give a pavement along that side of the road. There's no pavement there at the moment, but that pavement will only extend to the front of this field, and then it peters out again because everybody else's land going that way is privately held. And so unless we're going to do a compulsory purchase and make the pavement go all the way up to the roundabout just short of the Mason's Arms, it's not much use really having this bit of pavement. Something that has happened since the traffic assessment was done is the town council has passed resolutions to impose safer streets, and the county council is going to impose residence parking in Somerset Road, Weymouth Road area. This will only increase traffic in Marston Lane as people are trying to avoid these streets. And so I think the traffic is a huge issue there. It's already difficult to pull out into Marston Lane from wherever they say, and I totally believe Mr. Lampkin's allegation almost that there's a lot more accidents there than we know about. And I've witnessed a lot of close shaves up there as well. So unless we stop people parking along there and make it even more of a rat run, then that'll be even more relevant. So there's just a couple of observations on there. So I'm minded to object to this.
Thank you, Mark. Any other councillors? Comments? I've got John, I can see hand up, and then Paul.
I would echo what Mark just said, particularly about transport, because I cycle down there all the time and it is really busy, and it's augmented massively recently because of the other problems on the other side. And this will make it a lot more difficult.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I would agree with that. I used to cycle along there regularly, probably 9 years ago, and I thought of it as a relatively quiet road. But when I go along there now, it seems to be really busy. So it's increased a lot in recent years. Going back to the point I started making earlier, really, it doesn't. This, as has been said very eloquently by the objectors, that this is a very sensitive site, and development on it should only happen in exceptional circumstances, and planning policy says the same thing. And I think what's proposed is far from exceptional. It's a proposal to build 5, is it 5? I think it's 5 self-built houses with no limits on size, particularly apart from number of stories, but that's potentially, as John said, I think 3 stories or 2 stories with space in the roof. And of course, they could be huge and they'll be sold on the open market, etc., etc. So I don't see any gain for the town from that. The gain is purely for LVA and the landowner. If it was to come back to us, and perhaps 2 out of the 5 houses were kind of the sites were affordable in some way, for affordable, and there was some sort of design codes developed, as in fact LVA are promoting for SGC, which restricted the size of the houses, potentially the value of the houses, whatever, then it may appear differently. But I do, having heard that the potential for further development, more houses north of this site, that's a big concern. But as Jane said, we can really only look at this application in it as it is at the moment, and I would object to it basically on the grounds that it's sensitive and there's no offset for Frome. There's no reason to develop this site, to accept development on this site, because it's so sensitive.
Great. Thank you. Paul. Any other comments? Oh, Lizzie.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Paul just said, because he said it brilliantly, and I heartily agree with him. I'd also like to, slightly broader point, kind of an unwitting apology to John Peverley. I'm not sure I've caught the name correctly. When this came to us before, my assumption about it was that the owner of Whitewell was the person who was kind of the owner of the field and therefore wanting to develop the space. And I think that what this does, it shows the importance to us as a council of hearing the wider story about developments and why it's really important that people come to meetings like this and make their voices heard. Because I'd come into this with a set of assumptions and you've just blown them out of the water. So I'd like to thank you for doing that and echo what Paul has said and others have said in terms of reason for objecting to it.
Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks very much. Any other comments? I'd like to thank John as well for your note, because it gave us an awful lot of historical background as to what had happened. A lot of us are relatively new councillors and don't go back that far. So I think, as Lizzie said, and I sort of wholeheartedly echo that, it gave us an awful lot of, as I say, historical background as to what has happened on this site, and put a lot of things into perspective. So thank you for coming, and thanks for the time that you took to put that down. It must have taken quite a while. Thank you very much. Thanks.
And we did stand in your driveway and actually go and have a look at the site, so that so and
it is a lovely tree.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no other comments. Just from my perspective, I think I echo pretty much what everyone else has said. It is totally against our local plan. The traffic survey is totally inadequate. Route protection, as you said, John, definitely needs, and the landscaping. So yeah, I'm inclined to very much object to this. So, Jane, do you think you could summarise that into a firm objection from us?
Yeah, I think what I sort of said at the beginning, really, that we object on the grounds of the inadequate traffic assessment based on the short duration that it was taken over, the fact that it's out of date and it wasn't carried out at peak times, and as I said previously about it's not clear whether the visibility display can actually be achieved. The fact that it doesn't meet the criteria of policy H3 in the neighbourhood plan, and I'll list those criteria as part of that. Concerns about the route protection plan being incorrect, and our concerns about the landscape impact assessment, that it really isn't clear the impact that it will actually have. And I thought that in addition to that, we should add, if the application is approved, we would want to see some design codes in place that keep the dwellings to an acceptable size and height, because despite all our objections, we know that sometimes applications still get approved. So I think it's important just to have that there. So, and hopefully then those design codes will come back to us and we can talk them through. Yes, so that'll be one of the things that I list as part of the criteria of policy H3. Yeah. So I'll list all those points as part of that. But yes, obviously I will form that into a better form of words.
Great. So if we can sort of vote on what James just said, and she'll put that into a good format, and our objection will be sent through. So if I can get someone to propose that, please. Thank you, Mark. John, second.
And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Yep. Again, thank you very much. Mr. Peverley. Mr. Lamb, thank you very much. Thank you also very much for coming, and it's always great to see members of the public. We just listen and have you got something else? You don't have to stay for the rest of this, by the way. You're more than welcome to.
Thank you.
Yeah, you don't have to stay for the other questions. Jane. Okay. It's marked with. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, bear with me. I've just received an email from Chris Beaver, who is now available to speak. Has he joined as an attendee? Yeah. Can we make him into a panelist? Yeah. Yeah, okay, so, right, I will also share a plan so that it, actually no, let me start. So the next application that we're going to discuss is it me squeaking? So it's item number 639 on our list, and it is for the service yard to the rear of units 1 to 4 station approach Frome. And the application is for the erection of 6 live work units, recladding to the elevations of units 2 and 4 station approach and associated works. Now we have the agent for the application with us, Chris Beaver. Chris, do you have any plans or anything that you want to share with us, or do you want me to put any plans on the screen?
Yeah, Kai, can you hear me okay, Jane?
Yes, we can, thank you. Yeah,
yeah, if you're happy just to put the site plan up on the street on screen, then I can speak to that if you like.
Yeah, okay. Bear with me while I sort that out.
Yeah, my apologies for being late to the meeting. I think there's a landscape master plan. I don't know if that you've got that one.
Oh, the master plan one. Okay, just
yeah, that might be just easier for people to understand.
Yeah, nearly there.
Okay.
There you go. Okay, over to you, Chris, if you'd like to talk us through the application.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jane. Yeah, I mean, just by way of background, I'm assuming most of the members are familiar with the station approach, and we're acting for the landowner. And you may be aware that the site was a sort of declining sort of industrial sort of collection of units, and our client acquired it in 2018. And Unit 1, which is on the front end of the site, has been sort of diversified. And we've just heard today that a planning application for the loggia and resiting of the Curry mobile is going to be approved under delegated powers. So really, this application sort of follows on from our initial work in diversifying the offer at Station Approach, and this site is a sort of rear service yard which isn't functionally required for parking or sort of loading, and as the uses have sort of diversified in the main Unit 1, this is really a surplus piece of land, and we identified it as an opportunity to accommodate some live work units on. So in preparation for that application, we've done sort of highways contamination and noise assessments that have informed the application. And we came to the conclusion that, yes, we could accommodate a sort of innovative sort of live work scheme, which would be effectively single aspect, sort of facing into the courtyard, and sort of separated by a high wall from the Froome reclamation yard. And they would be effectively sort of upside down sort of properties with amenity at the upper levels. And the scheme that you can see in front of you shows the terrace against the Froome reclamation at the back. And each unit would be provided with a parking space plus some visitor parking. And critically, the scheme has been tracked so that the sort of larger vehicles that visit Froome reclamation and the other industrial units, you can still turn an HGV in there. And we've also looked for opportunities to sort of improve the rear elevation of that. So the application not only includes the live work units, but includes a sort of green wall to the rear of the existing industrial units. And we've introduced some landscaping. And I think this is the type of place that, you know, only suit a very particular sort of purchaser, and that's why they've been designed as sort of live work with integrated studios. So we think that they can sort of coexist in sort of environmental terms there by reason of the design, and it will add a bit of vitality and surveillance over the back of the units, and will allow the applicant to continue to invest in improving the whole sort of environment there, really. So I think I don't know whether you've got any sort of elevations at all there, Jane, or anything you want to show the members, but they're quite contemporary designed sort of units. There's a sort of design statement actually, which probably illustrates the design report that, yeah, that's right. So that's a sort of a graphic of the units. So as I say, they're very contemporary sort of design, sort of upside down living with these integrated studios, and very much sort of single aspect with balconies and so forth. So yes, I think yeah, I'll probably leave it there for now, but I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Upside down living, does that mean you live upstairs or downstairs?
Yes. Yeah, upstairs. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you have your sort of main amenity and habitable space sort of upstairs, and you have the sort of bedrooms down the bottom. So you know, so where your main sort of living experience is where you're getting the more of the natural light and so forth, and the outlook.
Is this considered a brownfield site?
Yes, yeah. So it's previously developed land, and as I say, it's a sort of surplus part of the site, which is a really dead sort of part of the site with no public realm, and it just services the rear of the gym. And of course, the gym will continue to have sort of rear access as well there.
Councillor, before any further questions, we do have a member of the public here who wants to speak on behalf of this application. So if we could, Steve, yeah, Steve, if you grab your microphone without. Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Can everybody hear? Can you hear this? Look online.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Can you hear?
Don't think they can. No.
It sounds as if they can.
Testing.
Oh. Yep, I can hear that. Yeah. Would you like me to have one of the plans up on the screen when you talk? The other one, maybe?
I've got a basic letter that I've written out over the last few days, just 2 pages, which I'll read out. I do have my own photographs, which disagree with what's been shown with Chris's idea. So I'm representing me and my wife who are landowners at Station Approach, KRG Properties Limited, who are landowners at Station Approach, and Froome Reclamation, who run the business from these 2 plots of land. And the directors are me and my wife and my 3 grown-up children, Carl, Robert, and John Carl. So these letters and these.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Okay. Oh.
yeah.
Sorry.
It might be better to pull it out of the holder and hold it karaoke style.
Can you hear something?
Yeah, I think that's better. Can you all hear online? Start talking.
Okay. So I'll read this. Oh, I was just going to say that this letter that I'm reading now and these images I've sent to your Froome Town website and also to Mender. I've lodged these.
Great.
Okay, so these can be viewed.
Okay,
Okay, so as adjoining landowners for over 25 years, we have experienced flooding on numerous occasions on the proposed site, as it is 2.5 meters below the neighbouring land. Our wall, which borders onto the proposed site, is in excess of 6 meters high, which act as a retaining wall at the height of approximately 2.5 meters from the lowest point up. Along the bottom course of the blockwork, there are approximately 12 weeps, which allow surface water to permeate from our land into the existing drains on that site. The wall is already showing signs of movement, which we monitor on a regular basis. If this proposed development is to be approved, we will be unable to maintain the wall as the new build will be less than 300 mil away. Rubbish, soil and weeds washed down by the rain will build up in this narrow gap behind the proposed building, making maintenance impossible for the landowner. Heavy machinery used in order to carry proposed works could bring this wall down. At present, the proposed area is used for parking and outside exercise for the gym, loading, unloading, and storage for 2 skips and a delivery van for dimensions. Where will the parking, etc., be replaced for these 2 companies without causing problems elsewhere on site? The plans suggest each unit is of 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and a guest room with bathroom. Clever words to hide the fact that these proposed units are nothing less than 3-bedroom townhouses with underground parking. This would suggest even more parking should be made available. 8 parking spaces are being created for 6 houses. The average family will have 2 vehicles plus visitors and possibly HGVs to go with the proposed new businesses below these houses. Children and pets may also reside here. Will it be considered safe living among forklifts, HGVs and other vehicles working in this tight area? Over the time we have worked here, we have suffered 6 break-ins. When the previous owner, RO, took away the damaged gates and fencing at the front of the site, there was a covenant attached to these said gates, which stated that these were to be locked every night at 6 p.m. We had an agreement with RO, the previous owners, when these gates and fence were removed, that an existing gate strengthened and repaired replaced those in position next to city planning. The covenant covers this refurbished gate, since which time we have not suffered any break-ins. And we pay a security guard to lock these gates every night at 10 p.m. after the gym closes. With this new development, we will lose our security, as the proposed new tenant property owners will not enjoy being locked in or enjoy locking and unlocking every time they travel in and out of this area. Froome Reclamation seems to get mentioned all the time in the proposal concerning our articulated vehicles. The fact is, we have 4 vehicles which are not articulated, and we have our own parking area. We may have, on average, 2 articulated vehicles deliveries per week. City Plumbing has at least one articulate vehicle every day delivering, as does Dimensions Bathrooms, plus other heavy goods vehicles delivering and collecting. The space at the rear of City Plum is just enough for articulated vehicles to turn around successfully. With the landscaping plan as shown, this would make it almost impossible for these manoeuvres and narrow the entrance for Froome reclamation. The gym plays live music from 7 a.m. Did I get that?
Yeah.
The gym plays live music from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. with the doors open most of the time to encourage the exercises performed by their customers. Froome Reclamation enjoys the music, but new tenants may not. Recycling and refuse collection vehicles and other delivery vehicles will have no option but to reverse down the proposed slope, as there is no scope for turning around. Froome Reclamation also creates noise and dust, which undoubtedly will cause nuisance to the proposed units, especially the proposed balconies. To sum up, the proposed development is going to be a problem for all existing businesses. Basically, it's already overdeveloped. The present owner seems determined to develop every square inch of this property without any consideration for his existing tenants and neighbours. The development already achieved at the front of this property at Station Road is a typical example of overdevelopment. Once a single unit, it has now been developed to house 8 visitors. The car park now has 4 restaurants, takeaways, a plant store, a milk dispensing unit operating from the car park, which is often covered with tables and chairs. Customers visiting these businesses often park and block the right of way because the car park is so full. Problems then arise for the businesses at the rear. This trading estate was never designed to be a trading estate in the way modern ones are designed today. In the proposal, it suggests even more development could be conceived in the future. We think enough is enough. There is no mention of how these proposed units will be heated. If oil or CO2 gas is implemented, then tanks will need to be positioned. There is no existing natural gas supply. Solid fuel will be undesirable. All these causes fumes which will blow across our working area. The existing private sewer drain and stormwater drains are not shown on the plan. Will these prove to be adequate, or will they need to enter other owners' properties? The existing water supply does not have sufficient pressure to serve a further 6 units. A new supply would cause disruption as it would need to follow the existing motorway. The need for more housing and work units are well covered in as much as there are now 45 starter units almost ready at the OT&H White site at Vallis Way, 1,700 houses at Keepwood, 300 behind McDonald's, 200 in Caxton Road. Froome has more proposed in the town centre, etc., etc., etc.
Thank you.
Chris, want to respond to that?
Sorry? Yeah. Chris, still with us as well. Is there anything you'd like to respond to the comments from Steve?
Yeah, I think we'll have a look at Steve's written representation and then we'll probably send the planning officer a rebuttal. I think probably what we would say is we have put in a drainage report and technical reports across all the disciplines, including highways and drainage. And obviously I understand the concerns that Steve's raised. So I think we will have a look at those and then we'll send the planning officer a response on those points. So it's probably best not to sort of go for a point by point rebuttal at the meeting this evening. But yeah, I hear what he says and welcome his comments.
Great. Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris. Councillors, any comments from any councillors? Yes, Bart. So you're in the room, you can go first.
Chris, thank you for that. Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah.
James, you got the overview back up again, the aerial plan. That one, yeah.
Just a minute. Wait.
Yeah, I'm looking at this plan here. strange as it may seem, I'm a regular user of the gym there.
Okay.
That green square in above the white car, that one there, thank you.
Mhm.
That is in front of a door to the gym, as far as I know. And the white car and the blue car are parked in the delivery doorway for Dimensions tiles. As well as, I can see how you're trying to provide parking for the proposed development. Where do visitors to the gym park, or is it proposed perhaps not to have a gym there in the future?
You know, the existing, this has been planned around the existing businesses, so they will still be there. There's obviously there's parking on the site frontage and to the side as well. And there is an element of visitor parking here as well for the residential. So certainly the proposal makes provision for the existing businesses to continue. But there are some changes to that sort of rear elevation of the building to sort of improve the environment there. But they will retain certainly pedestrian access from this side.
It's just the plans we're looking at here don't show that. I mean, I don't know where I would park if I were going to the gym, or where Dimensions will get their trucks in to get the tiles in through the back gate.
Yes, I mean, there's obviously
also,
a car park on the frontage, and there's a car park on the side as well.
I mean there.
No, the other side actually. Yeah.
Here.
Off the plan actually, but yes. So in that,
right. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I'm also familiar with that piece of land there being very low lying beneath Froome Rec's wall, and often half of that car park is unusable because it's, well, certainly up to the sills of your car in water. So I take it you're making some sort of remediation for the drainage there.
There is a detailed sort of drainage report which sort of follows the sort of SUDS strategy there. So and things like permeable paving, drainage rill. There's going to be some sort of, obviously there's the soft landscaping which will give more attenuation as well. So as I say, I would, if you want to look into the detail of that, there is a full drainage strategy submitted with the scheme.
And the other thing is the tall wall that Mr. Haller referred to earlier on that supports his yard. Is there some sort of party wall agreement? Are you going to build directly up to it, or is there going to be a gap?
Yes, I think it's designed with a gap, but I think there will inevitably have to be a party wall agreement, and these sorts of situations are normally resolved out. Well, they are resolved outside the planning process. So if planning permission is granted, then there will be a separate process of a sort of party wall process, which is done under other legislation. So it's not something that the planning process normally gets involved with.
No, I'm sure, but it's I am concerned about that wall coming
down.
Yeah,
I mean, there's obviously there's the condition of the wall, that would be undertaken by a surveyor pre-development. There's the sort of ongoing sort of maintenance sort of regime of the wall, and any other party wall matters, and they would all be dealt with through the usual way through a party wall agreement, which is done under other legislation.
Thank you. And so with your so-called upside down living, people's living accommodation is going to be the very top of this building. And so if they look out to the front, they'll be looking out onto the gym and the back of Dimensions tiles. If they look out to the back, then they're going to have a view of the reclamation yard, which is of long standing. Is that deemed suitable for perhaps a young family who are trying to get a live space there?
Well, I think, the market will determine, if this development goes ahead, then people will be choosing this location to suit their lifestyle, and really that's why they've been designed as live work units, so that people can do home working from there, and people will have to make the judgments really as the convenience of the location, and the amenity really. So, but certainly at that high level, you will get some quite good views out, sort of longer range views, certainly.
And the work aspect, my final point, the work component of the building is, I think, 27.5 square meters.
Yeah, so it's a sort of studio, that's right, yeah.
So what sort of businesses are you envisaging to use quite a small
Well,
space like that?
They would be businesses that would have to fall within the class sort of B1 or now E use class, which would be compatible with residential. So nothing that would make sort of noise, dust or fumes. So sort of benign activities really. So office or craft sort of based sort of activity.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. I've got Paul first, then Jane, then John.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks for both representations. When I first looked at this, I quite like this proposal. It's quite an interesting, unusual proposal, and an unusual way of looking at this space. But having heard representations and read other comments, I've kind of got increasing concerns about it. There does seem to be a few things that aren't really thought through, such as pedestrian access. It doesn't look like there's safe pedestrian access of any sort, really. You have to walk along, basically in amongst heavy goods vehicles to access this site. And even actually, as you come into the site, there doesn't appear to be any kind of footways or anything. So even coming into the site, you're having to negotiate cars, etc. And I'm quite concerned about, having looked at that artist impression again, that the ground floor studios, I mean, they're going to be extremely dark. There's going to be hardly any light going into those, which is not an ideal place to be running any kind of business, even an office business, let alone a craft-based business. So that would be a significant concern. The flooding, I'm just looking at the flooding strategy and looking at the plan, and I can't see anything. As I understood, the retaining wall has weep holes in it to allow water coming through the ground, and I can't see any where provision is made for that water coming through from the higher level. It looks like you're removing a gully, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of new provision for water where that gully exists at the moment. So I wonder what's happening to that surface water that's coming through that ground. And business parking, yeah, the parking provision doesn't seem to be quite adequate. I mean, I'm all up for this being a very sustainable location and maybe only having one parking space per dwelling. However, these are businesses and they're existing businesses. There just doesn't really seem to be enough parking for the businesses there. 2 visitor parking spaces, and having to rely on parking elsewhere at the front of the development, the front of the building, doesn't really seem adequate. So in a way, I'm slightly reluctant because I quite like the design, etc. But I have some concerns definitely raising, and I'm beginning to think that actually this isn't quite fully thought through yet, and maybe we need to wait and see what your response is to the earlier representations. So I don't know whether we can, well, let the discussion continue. Maybe we'll see where we go. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Paul. Jane, you wanted to?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, actually, just echo something that Paul that just said there. When we first saw the drawings, we thought, you know what, actually that could work. That looks good. Can see how that would fit into the environment. And then we actually, Steve and myself, visited the site, and it really wasn't clear on paper. But once we were actually on the site, the gates, the entrance gates into the reclamation yard, are here. And when you're looking at this plan on the ground and you're actually there, it very much looks as though this element of landscaping here will block the entrance into the reclamation yard, or the existing entrance where the gates are. Okay, you could argue that they could come around here, but the gates would actually have to be reorientated. I should have picked a different word. Moved, thank you, to enable traffic to actually, come in through there. But as I say, that really wasn't apparent until we were physically stood there on site. And the other thing was an articulated lorry actually made a delivery while we were there. And we could also see that how this element of the landscaping here would make it very, very difficult for that lorry to have actually turned around and gone back out from the site. And lastly, this white block here, I believe this is also a delivery entrance, the loading bay to these existing businesses. And obviously a vehicle of any size, depending on what they're delivering, there doesn't appear to be an adequate turning area there for the vehicles to get back out. So I just wanted to point that out, really. And I wonder if Steve Haller, whether or not you felt that was an issue with the access gates as well. Obviously you're more familiar with it than us.
Yes, as I said in my letter, it just can't work there because, firstly, all the parking there for the gym, and they do use that area for outside exercise. So all the cars would be moved somewhere else on site, and there's nowhere for them to go. Chris says that there's parking all on that side, but you could only get a row of perhaps 6 cars there because they can't double up and get out.
Is that part lit?
Sorry?
Is that part lit of an evening?
Well, the houses from Butler's Gardens overlook
the parking on the left as we're looking at that plan.
where that arrow is.
Yeah, well, you see where that red car
Yeah.
is.
Okay. At the moment, there's a car lot there. A man
Yeah.
sells cars from that area, so it's
Right.
full of perhaps 20 or
So
30
what I'm
cars.
saying is, if people are using the gym and parking there, is that bit lit?
No, it's not lit.
Right. So people, if it's late night, and they
Yeah.
come out the gym and walk up there in
Hmm.
dark, in pretty much.
There's no lights there.
Right.
No. Only my security lights, but they're only on if you walk into my yard.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I've lost my thread now. Where were we? Yeah, so all the cars that park, I mean, sometimes, some evenings even, there are 30, 40, 50 cars. They park all over where that area, proposed area is, and my yard as well, and all along where that red car is. There's multiples of cars there all the time. Where are they going to go if this development goes through, And Chris says, oh, they can go out the front, but that's already, as I said, it's already chock-a-block. There are so many takeaway restaurants there. People pull up and they block the entrance for cars, vehicles coming in. We have to go around and tell them off for parking, but they don't move. They go sit and eat their burgers or whatever. So there's just not space to do this. But I'm not against this type of work dwelling, but not here. There just isn't room for it all to happen.
All right, thanks very much. Thanks for that, Steve. I've got John and then Sheila.
I guess my question is again about, given the fact that we have limited industrial space in Frome, this conversion to multi-use, still industrial, I guess, in a way, is this setting a precedent? Is that something we want? Because I sort of like the idea. I look at it, I think it's a great idea. And then I start to look at the practicalities of it all, and I'm just wondering, is this setting a precedent? Because is this going to be able to sort of spur on some other proposed schemes in other parts of town? I know you just said this. I asked the same question before, but it is relevant.
Yeah, I mean, that. Oh, I can hear myself. What happened? Sorry. Yeah, I mean, we have seen recently a lot of applications coming forward for live work units. I do think there is demand for those is increasing and will continue to increase. The fact that this is an employment site, you could argue that it's brownfield or infill. The element of work within the live work units would would enable them to happen in that location. So yeah, I mean, I don't think this is so much about setting a precedent, more about meeting a demand, I believe, but whether or not that is exactly the right location for them in this instance, you know, that's open to debate really, but they would qualify with the work element in that employment area, if that kind of answers your question.
Thanks, Jane. Sheila and then Lizzie.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for this to everybody who's contributed here, because like Paul, when I looked at this, I thought, oh, this is interesting. This is modern design. It's got the potential of being an interesting development. But I'm particularly picking up Paul's point about being able to walk down this area, you know, access for pedestrians to get in here. And there's a sort of a rather alarming mixture of articulated lorries, car parking and walking without any sort of, you know, clear space for people to be able to access this. And it starts to look a bit alarming, and it is a bit of a dodgy space around there to even get into the reclamation yard, just because there are cars and lorries and all sorts of things all over the place around there. And I think that sort of level of detail is missing on this. And so I've really valued the conversation we've had tonight, and I hope that it's actually contributed to the ability for some modification to take place. It's tricky to be able to get round the back here to the gym without feeling safe. And the only way you feel safe is by taking your car around there, which seems to be a bit of a problem. So I welcome all the conversation and hope that some modification can take place.
Thanks. Lizzie.
Put my hand down, forgot to unmute, there you go. I had the similar kind of excitement vibe followed by the kind of increasing sense of reality of like, oh, really? Oh, dear. It is exciting. It's an exciting idea. I think what we're learning from hearing more about the site is it might be an exciting idea in the wrong place. And I don't know all the details of the ownership of different patches of land dotted through the whole, let's call it estate by the station, all the station approach and all the different plots and patches that have been there. I think there is a sense of excitement about what's being created there, and the fact that it has become quite a vibrant little corner of town in different ways from how it traditionally has been used. And I think that's to be encouraged, but it feels like what's missing is a sort of a master plan almost for that whole area, to say, okay, how do all of the different patches of land and all the existing businesses and potential residents interact? How do I, if I want to cycle down to the reclamation to pick up something little, and put a door on the back of my bike and cycle home, can I do that safely? If I want to walk to the gym, am I worried about that because there's no light? Is that counterintuitive that I can't walk to a gym or run to a gym? So there are some shared interests here, and it feels like things like security, things like lighting, things like access and pavements, things like having a safe wall that's not going to fall down on, you know, that wall could fall down on parked cars right now, or it could fall down on people's houses or offices in the future. So there are some shared interests here that it feels like if people could kind of get together and really talk about them as the different landowners and different occupiers of that space, you could come up with something fantastic that would work really, really well for the current users of the space and for people with the sort of futuristic ideas. So again, I've gone off because people have done all the planning stuff. I'm doing big philosophy again. But I think that could be a lovely thing that could really help the area just kind of continue to develop in an exciting way.
Great. Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks for your comments. Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Lizzie's just said. I just wanted to go slightly off piece perhaps for a planning meeting, but I I think it's clear, really, from what certainly members have said, that in some ways we're quite excited by the prospect of some development here, but it's not. It doesn't appear, because of the problems that are becoming apparent, it's not quite the right development. And I wonder whether, actually, I'm sure it's probably not viable financially, but if it was purely business space that was being developed there, perhaps with undercroft parking, so you didn't lose the parking, you had offices or studios up on stilts, as it were, or posts, with undercroft parking, then it could be really, really positive. There could be something really positive from this. But I understand, obviously, that developing business space is not so profitable as developing residential space. So that may be a no-goer, but it's just a thought, really. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Paul. Any other questions, comments? I exchanged a couple of notes with Jane on, so I'll read out what I said. My comment with her was, could we defer this pending a response from the agents? Because I think what I heard is pretty much what Lizzie said. I think she encapsulated everyone's thoughts quite eloquently, actually, probably better than I can, and much better than I can, in fact. Yeah, there is a lot of positives about this, but there's also a lot of issues. I think, with regards to how it worked with the existing business, we want to protect the existing business. There is existing business here. We don't want, what I heard, we don't want to jeopardize what they're doing. But, if this spot could be developed, it could be really, really good. Yeah, I think as people have said, there's issues with parking, issues with, the lighting, especially late at night if you're coming out of the gym. Jane sort of put a note back saying we need the agreement with the case office to extend our response time, so possibly we couldn't extend. Chris, you said you would come back with some comments. How quickly do you think you could come back with comments?
Well, I think Steve was reading from a letter, so I think if that's on the Mendip website, we can upload it and then prepare a response to that. It might also be sensible for us to wait for some of the other consultees to come back as well, and then consider everything in the round. And with a scheme like this, it's normally quite inevitable that some form of change will happen during the life of the application, either sort of plan revisions or sort of rebuttals. So the chances are it would come back to you anyway, because if we put a revised submission in, you'll get reconsulted anyway, I would have thought. So at the very least, we will prepare a rebuttal to the points that Steve's raised. And if we feel there's some, listening to the debate tonight, there might be some more things we can do to sort of incorporate into a revised plan. So, which could then be considered at a subsequent meeting.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Thanks for that clarification.
Do you want me to just run through? Yeah. So just for mostly for Chris's sake, really, just to run through the bullet points of the concerns that we've heard and perhaps feel need to be addressed. If there is going to be any revisions, because I think in principle we like the idea of live work, but it at the moment it won't work. So the concerns are about the parking, the amount of parking for the businesses, the impact it will have on the parking for the surrounding existing businesses, the security of the site. So security that Steve Haller was talking about in terms of, currently they have locked gates that are closed by a security company. How is that going to work with the residential element of it? Security for people using the site, pedestrians, so the lack of lighting and the fact that there is heavy traffic movement in that area. Pedestrian safety, I said. So all around the impact on the existing businesses that are there and the access into the reclamation yard as it stands. And then all the issues that we've heard about, that wall and the flooding and the drainage and so on. So yeah, sorry, there was quite a few there, but you know, I think they're the things that we would really want to see addressed before we would, you know, be in a position to comment any further, I think.
That's I've taken a note of that, and we'll have a look at Steve's letter, and then we'll let you know, keep you informed, Jane, of how we go forward.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Where that leaves it with us is, assuming that there will be some kind of reconsultation, I will let the case officer know that we have had this discussion, and we anticipate that there will be amendments to the scheme, and that we will send our formal response once we have seen the amendments come forward. If it turns out that there aren't any amendments, then obviously I'll keep an eye on that, and then we will just object on the grounds that I've just talked through. I think that's probably the best way forward.
Okay. Councillors, does that sound a good way forward to everybody?
I mean, I just wanted to just check that. I mean, I'm sure that's probably right, but we don't need to object as the plans are at the moment, with kind of further consultation pending, if you like.
Yeah. So my holding reply would be that we have concerns about the application as it stands, and that we will wait to see if there's any amendments. If there aren't any, then as I said, I'll just I'll object on that basis.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we don't actually vote on it because we're not given a decision yet.
We don't need to. No.
Okay.
No.
Great.
But could I ask Steve? Can I have that hard copy that you've got? Because I didn't get anything via email, or if
We sent it today.
yeah, I didn't get anything.
Yes,
All this cars are parked in the gym. These are parked because there's no more room. This one's parked on the right side because there's no more room. Yeah. These are the exercise facilities, like and skips and things. This yard is huge.
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you for your time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've said hopefully amend it and
Okay.
amend it haven't even.
They won't.
Yeah, it'll
They
take
won't.
a day or two.
But everybody else, all they just have a letter, say that this development, why doesn't get, I'm the majority of them. And they haven't got those little posters up.
I don't think they're doing it anymore.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Right, yes.
Thanks very much, Chris, for joining, and I'm sure we'll be talking again. Thanks for your
Thanks,
time.
then, guys. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Oh,
Sorry.
didn't think it would take that long. Sorry.
You're very patient for the last hour and a half. Do you want to come a bit closer?
Does it change your mind?
Okay. Over to you, Jane.
Okay, so the next application that we are going to discuss is number 642 on our list, and that is Old Vallis House, Vallis Road, Frome. And it's for the change of use of land for the stationing of 2 converted shipping containers to provide holiday accommodation and the formation of a new access. And if you just bear with me, I'll just pull up a plan on the screen, because that might be, so we have Joe, who is the applicant, with us, who's just going to talk us through. So if I put the plans up, that hopefully will make that easier for him. There you go. Okay. So yes, as as you will have seen on my notes that I sent through previously, I believe there are already 2 holiday lets on the site. Yep. And the pods, or however you want to describe them, are proposed would be an expansion of that business. And actually, I should probably just let Joe tell you all about it.
Over to you, Joe. Is that working?
I think. Yeah.
Is that better? There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of nods from the online.
Excellent. My name is Joe Pearce. I'm here to introduce the application at Old Vallis House on behalf of my family, my wife and 2 kids. A little bit about my history. I have been in the property management sector for 7 years, managing Airbnbs on behalf of clients' portfolio properties in central London, and did that successfully, and wanted to move that vision to the countryside, somewhere more rural, where we could incorporate family life with it. And we found a plot of land on the edge of Frome, Old Vallis House, and we set about shaping a vision for the land. We wanted to create a space that was sort of restorative, a utopia, so to speak, something which we could create increasing levels of biodiversity, a wildlife haven, attempt to bring new species to the area, and ultimately create a sort of space that we could offer the guests and users for our friends and family that would be a sort of restorative space, and one we could hand down from generation to generation. The existing businesses that are already there are 2 successful Airbnbs that are currently running. Since we've launched, we've had 5-star reviews consistently, never dropped a star, so to speak. And we hope that they're bringing a really good contribution to the local economy already. A lot of the people we have through the door are keen to try the restaurants, keen to try the takeaways, go to the pubs and spend money on the high street. So we hope that that's been positive impact for Frome already, as well as a positive impact for jobs, a solid amount of jobs being provided to the local community for cleaning and management services. The unit we're proposing would be an extension of that, and hopefully quite appropriate to Frome. I love Frome because it's quirky, independent, and really vibrant, and this hopefully reflects that. Something that is quite unique in England, not just to the area, but across England. There's not many applications. I've not seen any documented cabins like this online yet in the UK. So hopefully what it would be doing is bringing people from further afield to Frome that would normally go and seek this experience sort of further. And there are comparables in sort of South Wales and Cornwall that people might travel to, and hopefully it would pulling them in from further afield to spend money in Frome. It would also, again, add value to the local economy for restaurants, takeaways, pubs, and so forth, and as well as jobs for cleaning and management services and gardening and so forth. The application also includes the new driveway, which we believe is just safer than the current driveway, current access way, as it's closer to the 30-mile-an-hour limit. And having chatted to neighbours, they're all quite keen for that 30-mile-an-hour to be pushed further out, which is obviously something that's maybe under review during this process. And yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for coming, Joe. Steve, Jane and I visited the site the other day. Unfortunately, you weren't able to join us, so I know you sent your apologies, but we went ahead anyway. The main concern that I had, and I think was shared with my colleagues, was the new access. We stood in that, there's a fairly broken down farm gate there at the moment. And we stood in there and we had to jump out of the way of several cars hacking around the corner. I know it's just within the 30-mile-an-hour limit and it goes into a 40-mile limit, but in our experience, most of them are doing 40 by the time they hit there. The access you've already got to Old Vallis House is somewhat further away and maybe that might be more appropriate access into the building than on, it's almost on the bend, isn't it? The proposed access. I know that doesn't tie in nicely with what you envisage here, because you want to keep everything on that tree line there, and I can see why you would do that and keep your home separate from it. But I have a real concern about it, and I know that in our dealings with Somerset Highways that they may say that the display is sufficient, but we didn't think so in a practical sense. Well, I'm talking for myself. It didn't seem so in a practical sense when we were there the other day. And I live not far from there, and I know how things hack along there. The second point I wish to make is this going to be, I know we must only look at the application that's in front of us. Is this going to be the first of several like this, or is this going to be a one-off? Because I know when the land came up for sale, there was an uplift if you got planning permission on the field. I saw that in the particulars of sale when it came up. And I knew the previous owner, or I've met the previous owner. So forgive me for thinking this could be a spearhead into a slightly larger development. It's quite a bit of undeveloped land on that side of Frome. It's about the only bit of land coming into Frome which is not yet developed. So I'd be interested, you don't have to say anything, but I'd be interested to hear your opinion on that.
Absolutely. We're really keen not to overdevelop it in any way. The unit that's proposed really was the only thing we've got plans. I've already drawn out plans of how I imagine the land to be in time. It doesn't include any further commercialization of any sort. It really will be no further units for Airbnb, certainly. Definitely no glamping, which is the obvious one that most people might decide to go for with a plot of land. From a personal point of view, running that proposed unit and the 2 cottages we've got already is enough of a workload for myself and the family already. We're keener to keep it as a sort of sanctuary and a space that is going to be used by the existing guests and our neighbours, and something that we can really treasure and try and get that biodiversity. And we've been trying to experiment with regenerative farming tactics, and we're trying to do something really positive for the land and not sort of take from it, so to speak. We felt that 1 unit was low impact, and we certainly don't want to do any sort of concrete pouring, digging, nothing heavy. Hopefully this is all quite light touch. Actually, we want to plant lots of trees. The big thing that we want to do is plant hundreds of trees really, and create a really sort of sheltered ecosystem on the land that that ultimately we can hand down to our kids and be proud of, and then also share with the guests and the neighbours en route to that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's no plans for anything beyond this.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? John and Lizzie?
Oh,
John and Lizzie. Oh, right. Sorry, John and then Lizzie.
Yeah, no, that's just a quick question, then a comment. The quick question is, I'm looking here at Google Earth and I'm looking down and I see a yurt or a bell tat in the corner of the field. Is that still there? And is that something you've been doing already?
That is a personal tent that we pop up for under 28 days every summer. And it is currently down. It comes up when the weather's good and goes down when the weather's bad. And actually the weather just knocks it down when it's bad. So we take it in and dry it out. And it isn't anything that is used for anything other than my kids to play in and to have a barbecue occasionally at. And yeah.
Okay, so that's great. That's just a bit of clarification, because I think I encourage everyone else to also look at a Google Earth image down on that little area there, the neighboring property, but also Vallis Veg down the hill, which has gone from a bare field, which we've known for over a decade or longer, to a forested area with camping and house and farm and everything down there. And so I can't see why, there's technical issues around the transport and the access and all that kind of stuff. I think that's important, but apart from that, I can't see any reason to object to this personally.
Great, thanks, John. Lizzie.
Absolutely, what John said. And I will say, I was looking at it thinking, I'm not sure. And the description, the words don't do it justice, to be honest. It was one of those where you read and you go, shipping containers, really? We're going to do that? And then the imagery, and I was thinking, mirrors. And actually, there's a very lovely photo representation within the documentation, and it just had me. And I'm just like, yeah, all right, fine. I think it's really exciting the way that you're building a business and looking at how that business can contribute to Frome and how you can support the visitor economy. I think that's great. The thing that we'll stumble upon is the access and how to get into that specific site. Looking at the same aerial shot as John on Google Maps, and across the road to the sort of brownfield site across the road, which Mark will remember the previous uses of, where we've had various applications come through to look at using that for either for residential or for lorry parking and all sorts. And one of the constants that we've said back to those applicants has been coming out of there, the access on the opposite side of the road from you is problematic. So I think that's where we're going to stumble. But if we can find a way to make the access work through your existing access point and support the reduction in speed limit down to 30 further out of town to enable that, then I think this is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, just next door, there's 6 or 7 shipping containers sitting in the middle of the field all over the place. So how could it change that? Sorry, I'll shut up.
Thanks, John.
They don't have mirrors on them, John, so they're not as pretty.
Welcome back, John.
I'll stop sharing now. I just wanted to show that image.
Any other comments? Sorry. Any other comments or questions? Paul?
Yeah, just a quick one. I mean, I kind of support everything that's been said, really. There's no reason to object to this. Yeah, I mean, shipping containers, great. If if that's what you want to have, I maybe would probably go for some other kind of form of architecture, perhaps. But anyway, just one thing I wanted to support really was the fact that you've got the parking arrangement away from the units, making the users of the units have to walk from their cars into the units, into the site, if you like. I think that's definitely something to be supported. However, I think I also agree with everyone that says that this access or the new access proposed is perhaps problematic. I wasn't on the site visit, so I have to kind of rely on perhaps what Mark and Jane and Steve have said about that. But I do know where this is. But again, if you could do something with the existing access, and it just means a little bit further for people to walk, perhaps, I don't see that necessarily as a problem. But otherwise, yeah, I don't see any reason to object to this.
Great. Thanks very much, Paul. Any other comments? Where are we then?
Oh, where are we? So I'm sorry, I had to leave the room.
I don't think we want to object to this. I think most people think it's a great idea, although we do have some concerns about the access. But obviously, that is a Somerset Highways issue, really, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah, they will determine whether or not they feel that the access is safe and that an adequate visibility display can be achieved in relation to the speed limits along that road. So even if, whilst we might object and have concerns about that, if Somerset County Council don't object, then actually that won't make any difference. And sorry, Steve, just to add that there is policy in the Mendip local plan that makes allowance for rural enterprise, such as holiday lets and that kind of thing. And I mean, we also know, I think, that there is a shortage of this kind of accommodation to serve the town at the moment. So it's certainly, I haven't or I believe there's no objection to it being used for that purpose, just that bit of a concern about the access.
Can we put that in some sort of a statement?
I can put that into some sort of a
Yeah.
statement, yes,
Great.
absolutely. I mean, I think if everybody's happy, I could say that, you know, we fully support the use of the land to be used for holiday lets. You know, this is something that would be valuable to the town. However, we do have concerns about the access and whether the visibility displays can be achieved, and would prefer to see the access taken from the existing access into the property.
Everyone's happy with that? Someone could propose that for us, please. John, thank you. Second by Lizzie.
John, oh yeah, John's got, yeah, that's unanimous, thank you. John confused me putting two hands up. Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And wish you well. Looks interesting.
Could you give that to Joe, just so you're aware, they're the comments from the Civic Society that have been submitted to mend it, just so that you're aware that they've done it.
Thanks for coming in and presenting. Sorry, it's we had to sit through. Not at all. Actually, just one of those things. Letting me say a few words. Great. Thanks very much. Thank you very much indeed. Jane.
Okay, so next on the list for discussion is number 645 on our list, and that's 1 Eagle Lane, Frome, and it's for the proposed alterations to the shop front. So you'll probably all recall that we've seen this application previously several times, and yes, Mark, it is the kebab shop. When the first time we saw the application, we objected because it would mean losing the recessed doorway, which we thought was a sort of important part of the historic street scene of the area. They then revised the plans and actually maintained the recessed doorway, and that removed our objection. This application, so whilst it still includes a recessed doorway, they will actually be moving the point where the recess is. So essentially they will be changing the shop front. The recess will be smaller and it will be further to one side than it is at the moment. So whilst that might not sound like much of an impact, you know, I think probably agree to a degree with what the Civic Society said, that actually we prefer the application that's already been approved and would like to see that one come forward. But you may not feel that it's that important, but over to you for comment, really.
Carriage lamps outside.
Yes.
I prefer the original one, but any other comments? Anyone else got any thoughts, objections about the carriage lamp? That goes on.
No. Okay.
Doesn't need any objection.
So no objection to what I said about us replying to say that we would prefer to see the original application, or no objection to the application as it's proposed?
Do we prefer the one that we've already agreed, or the amended plans as presented now? I think is what James asked.
And is it that, for me, is it that substantially different? Because on the whole, I don't care that much. Like, I haven't seen anything that makes me care.
That's what I was asking. Do you care?
It would appear from the looks that there is no real objection.
Okay.
To it, quite frankly.
Had to ask.
Yeah, had to ask. Thank you, Beth. Great.
Yeah. So because we've raised it and discussed it, we'll need to vote on that.
Vote.
Yeah.
Okay, so
are we voting on this one or the previous
one? We're
one?
voting on this one.
voting on this one. No objection on this one.
Okay.
Sheila's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Sheila.
Sorry, I just having another quick look at it, and Do you get any sense of why they want to change this? Is there some reasoning put the door?
I think it's because it makes internally it makes it a better arrangement for people who are queuing when they're actually inside the shop, and I can see no other reason than that.
So do you think it's something that they've developed since COVID? You know, do they come in one way and out the other way? Is that what they're looking at?
No, so the other doorway actually leads to the flats that are above the property. But I think what it probably does is it creates more space for people to be able to be going in and at the same time as people going out. But other than that, I can't really see what the benefits are.
Okay, thank you.
Provoke some discussion. Lizzie and then Paul.
So I'm racking my memory on this one because we talked about it. And I think there was a previous version, which we objected to because they took away the recess.
That's right,
But that followed the pattern of the new one, which was door on the right, counter down the left. You see? Hey, I pay attention. So I think this is kind of reverting to their original application, but with a recess.
With a smaller recess.
Yeah, which
that's a bit of
I think, I have no problem with that if that seems to meet the requirements of conservation and so forth.
Great, thanks. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can see that it's probably, maybe it's to some degree about customers, but it seems to be making more space for for whatever food provision, food preparation, etc., and reducing the customer space. And I seem to remember the previous application that has been approved, it tried to achieve the same thing, but not very well. It wasn't really using the space well. So I kind of feel that maybe, this is a reasonable compromise. Yeah, I don't think it's massively terrible. At least we've got the recess and there's
endlessly.
No
objection.
No objection.
Yeah. If we could vote on that.
We've got there in the end.
Yeah.
I'm going to thanks, John. Someone second. I can't second. Okay, second. Mark. All those in favour.
And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. So I haven't specifically highlighted any others for discussion, but you may wish to do so yourselves based on the comments that you've sent me or based on my notes. So are there any others that you would like to raise for discussion? Paul's got his hand up.
I'm slightly reluctant given the time, but I wondered if we should talk about Willow Vale at all. I mean, obviously the Civic Society have objected to it.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes, so let me just find it on my list. Yeah, so this is number 641. It's a listed building application for the maltings at 3 Willow Vale Froome, and it's for works to the roof and windows, together with internal works to the gantry and the installation of a wood burning stove. We have seen this application before, or an application for one of the maltings at least before, and it appears that a lot of the original interior of the building has been lost through refurbishment over the years, historical refurbishment, and the building as it is at the moment, it's not well insulated. I think the polycarbonate roof is an issue. The glazing is not great. No real insulation to speak of. So partly what they want to do is to improve the living conditions. The thing that I was concerned about was the roof terrace. It's not actually something that you would expect to see of this type of historic building, and also how that would impact on the neighbouring properties. You can't really see it from, well, I couldn't really see from the plans you know, how that would sit in amongst the neighbouring properties, and not just in terms of any overlooking issues, but also, you know, the potential noise impacts from that area being used on the adjoining properties. And I think you've seen the Civic Society's comments. So yeah, they were saying that removal of part of the roof structure to create a roof terrace, they're objecting to that element of it, as it undermines the overall form and unity of the building, given its location in Willow Vale. The removal of the polycarbonate roof panels is welcome, but these could be replaced by glass or part glazed, which would at least continue the ridgeline that butts up against its neighbour and preserve the historic form. The flat roof, glazed balustrade and glass box proposed would be visually worse than what is there at present. There will also be considerable difficulties in resolving the roof and wall junction and providing drainage to the terrace. Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably one of those that you really need to go in and have a look around the building to fully appreciate the impact of the works. And, you know, I would suggest that we would want to take the advice of the conservation officer on this one, really. John's got
got John and then Paul.
Yeah.
You called me.
I did. You're John.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear. Sorry, I mean, it's given the fact that so many things have changed already. It's not like it's an original form, and change is a good thing. And if it's a nice terrace, there's nothing wrong with the roof terrace per se. I take the point about neighbors, as long as neighbors are involved, and I think we should look at it. But I think, you know, change is good. There's lots of stuff here that just doesn't change because people think it's got to be preserved, like the comment about roof line and all that. Well, yeah, but change is okay. So unless we can find a reason, specifically like neighbors hate it, or there's something terrible, I can't see a problem with it, because even the civic society say that they don't like what's there now. So this will obviously be an improvement.
Thanks, John. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. Change is fine, but I think doesn't necessarily mean that whatever they do will be better than what's there now. I think my feeling is it's kind of it's quite a clumsy proposal, really, just kind of basically chopping the roof off and putting a flat roof on. In different circumstances, I'm a great lover of flat roofs and roof terraces, etc. But it does appear that this is kind of historic roof, and just to kind of remove it and put something else on there does seem a bit brutal, really, in some ways. I think, I mean, looking at it, I'm just looking at the photographs and design access statement, and it appears that there was a hip going in towards the building in front, which kind of suggests, I don't know, that maybe this roof was there before the building was in front or something. I don't know, but anyway, it seems to be that I'd be really surprised if the conservation officer is okay with this. So in a way, maybe we just need to kind of, say, I don't know, subject to conservation officer, yeah, because I'd be surprised if she approved it, really.
Any other, anyone else got any other comments?
No. Okay, I mean, I think I would agree with Paul that that we raise our concern about the impact of the flat roof, and then say subject to the conservation officer's views, or we would defer it to the conservation officer's views, because I think it is complicated, and you really and Paul's also right. This actually in terms of Frome history, this has got a lot of history, in terms of how it was used as a maltings, and there were lots of buildings surrounding it that were all, used as part of that process. So yeah, I agree with John, change is good, but this, I think, is quite an important building in the town. So we should have somebody who's able to go in and look at it properly, such as a conservation officer, really determine the outcome of this one.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's an intriguing little place, isn't it? You don't really see it. You know, it's sort of hidden behind. I think it is. Looks really interesting.
So do we have to object, or can we just comment that we are concerned or something along those lines?
We don't have to formally object. We could just raise a concern, but then it would be lodged as a neutral comment. So I guess it's how strongly councillors feel about whether this is an objection or just an observation.
I would vote for observation personally.
Can I just ask a quick question? Sorry to jump in. We've seen this before, haven't we? And I'm sure that the proposal was for glass, to replace the polycarbonate with glass or something like that before. And did that get approval or not? Do you know?
It did, yes.
Okay.
Although I think there are actually 3 properties within the Maltings that have a similar setup. So I wasn't 100% clear looking at the history whether it was actually this one that we'd seen before or whether it was one of the other properties. But I think those polycarbonate roofs overall are causing a problem all round.
Not surprising, really.
Lizzie, there we go. Come up with something.
I think I'm in kind of slight limbo because if the roof structure is historic and old and significant and important, then we should object. But if the roof structure is not, then I love the glazed thing, and I'm with John on that, of like walkways and glass are kind of funky, and let's contrast, because otherwise, you know, if that roof structure has to come down for whatever reason, it would get replaced either with a pastiche of the old building or with something which wouldn't be allowed to do a roof line because you can't match up roof lines of stuff, and it would. So I think the glass thing is just fun and interesting and exciting. But if that internal structure is actually an important thing, which only the conservation officer could really tell me, then I'd be objecting. So I don't know how you fence it.
Well, I think if we raise our concerns, and you know it is important and it really should be kept and recorded, then the conservation officer will ensure that that happens. So I think it would be sufficient for us to raise a concern rather than having to object if we're not sure.
Yeah, that would be my preferred.
Yeah. Can we vote on that?
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to propose that. I like that one, Joe. Thank you. John seconded it. All those in favour of that?
No, that's unanimous. Thank you.
I hate objecting to things where
Yeah.
we're trying to do something.
So are there any others that you would like to raise for discussion, or are you happy for me to comment on the rest?
Thank you, Mark. I'll second that. All those in favour of that? Over to Jane.
Is Lizzie voting?
Yes,
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry. Sorry,
I didn't hear someone say vote. Sorry, I was
Yeah.
looking at the list to see if there was anything else to talk about. So. Yes, Jane's in charge of everything.
Yeah, sorry, that's unanimous. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to be bossy.
Thank you. I think that concludes Appendix 1, or agenda item 5, or 4, 5, whatever. The next planning meeting will be on the 26th of August 2021.